Have you ever found out, months later, that someone lied to your face, calmly, confidently, while you nodded along and trusted every word? That feeling isn't stupidity. It's a blind spot, and it's fixable. Machiavelli built an entire philosophy around one idea. Appearance is a weapon, and most people never learn to disarm it. Tonight, you learn to disarm it permanently. So let's unlock exactly how that weapon works and how you take it out of their hands. Before we start, if you've ever been lied to and never saw it coming, type the word blindsided in the comments right now. Hold on to that feeling for the next 40 minutes, because by the end of this video, you will not be that person again. Think about the last time someone apologized to you with a completely straight face. A coworker who missed a deadline. The server crashed. I sent it. Check your spam folder. My kid got sick. I was at urgent care all morning. The voice was steady. The eye contact was solid. The details were specific enough to sound real. And you believed it, not because the story was airtight, but because the performance was. Or think further back, to a partner or a friend who swore they were somewhere they weren't. You didn't catch it that night. Nothing in their face gave it away. You caught it 3 weeks later when the truth surfaced on its own. And only then did you replay that calm, steady face in your memory and realize something uncomfortable. It was never actually calm. It was constructed deliberately for your benefit in real time, while you sat there feeling grateful for their honesty. Or think about the last salesperson who told you a product was the last one in stock. Someone else is looking at it right now too. Warm smile, urgent tone, completely plausible timeline. You bought faster than you normally would, not because the scarcity was verified, but because urgency, delivered with a steady, friendly face, reads as fact rather than as a tactic. None of these 3 moments, the coworker, the partner, the salesperson, required a single piece of evidence to work on you. They only required a convincing enough surface. This happens because human beings are not built to assume deception. For most of our evolutionary history, we lived in small groups where trust was cheap, cooperation was survival, and constantly suspecting the people around you would have gotten you exiled or killed long before it protected you. Our default setting, wired in over tens of thousands of years, is to believe what we're told unless something forces us not to. On top of that, we're taught from childhood that suspicion is rude. Questioning someone's story to their face feels like an accusation, and most people would rather absorb a lie than risk an awkward confrontation. Liars, whether they do it consciously or not, are simply exploiting a setting you never chose and were never taught to override. Machiavelli understood this 500 years before modern psychology gave it a name. In The Prince, he wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few know what you really are." He wasn't being cynical for the sake of it. He was describing how judgment actually works in the real world. Fast, shallow, and surface first. We read tone before content. We read posture before facts. We read confidence before evidence. The mask isn't an exception a liar occasionally puts on. It is the default interface every person presents to you, all day, every day. And most people never learn to look past that interface to whatever is actually running underneath it. Here's how you start. First, stop grading truth by confidence. Confidence is a performable skill, not proof of anything. The most convincing liars you will ever meet are not nervous. They are rehearsed. Second, when someone's story and their emotional delivery match up a little too perfectly, a little too smoothly, treat that as a signal to look closer instead of a reason to relax. Real memories are messy. They stumble, they backtrack. They include irrelevant details nobody would bother inventing. Third, in your next 5 real conversations, deliberately watch someone's hands and feet instead of their face. The face is the most rehearsed part of the body. The hands, the feet, the shoulders, those are the parts almost nobody trains, and they leak far more truth than any expression ever will. But knowing that a mask exists is only the beginning. The real skill, the one Machiavelli spent an entire chapter building an image around, is knowing exactly where the seams of that mask actually are. And that is exactly where we're going next. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must know how to imitate two animals at once, the fox and the lion. One must be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. Most people only ever hear the second half of that line, the part about strength and intimidation. They skip past the first half, the part that actually matters for what we're building tonight. Before you can ever protect yourself, you have to be able to see the trap in the first place. A lion with no ability to recognize a trap just walks face first into one, roaring the whole way down. Picture a negotiation. Someone across the table tells you a number is final, non-negotiable, take it or leave it. Their tone is flat, almost bored, like the conversation is already over. Most people accept that flatness as proof of finality. But a trained eye asks a different question first. Is this genuinely the end of the conversation? Or is this flatness itself the performance, calculated to make you stop pushing? The fox doesn't react to the tone. The fox asks what the tone is designed to make you do. Or picture a friend who tells you completely unprompted, "I would never do that to you, you know that." Nobody, being accused of nothing, announces their innocence unprompted. That single sentence, appearing with no question asked, no accusation made, is itself a kind of trap recognition test. The fox doesn't hear reassurance. The fox hears a preemptive defense being built before any attack was launched and asks, defense against what exactly? Or picture a colleague pitching an idea in a meeting who opens with, "I know this might sound like I'm just protecting my own project, but hear me out." They've named the objection before anyone raised it, which sounds like transparency, but a trap-aware listener notices something else. Naming an objection out loud is also an effective way to make the room feel embarrassed to raise it afterward. The fox doesn't hear disarming honesty. The fox hears a preemptive move designed to close off scrutiny before it starts. This works because deception almost always follows patterns, and patterns can be studied the same way any trap can be studied once you've seen it triggered a few times. Liars tend to over-explain motive when nobody asked for motive. They tend to insert reassurance before suspicion has even been raised. They tend to answer the question they wish you'd asked instead of the one you actually asked. None of these things prove a lie on their own, but once you start counting how often they cluster together in the same conversation, around the same topic, you stop being surprised and you start recognizing the trap before you've stepped anywhere near it. So build this habit. First, whenever someone defends themselves against an accusation you never made, write it down mentally and hold it. It rarely means nothing. Second, listen for answers to questions you didn't ask. That's a person managing the narrative in advance, not merely answering you. Third, over the next month, keep a private mental tally, just for yourself, of who in your life does this often. You are not building a case against them. You are building your own map of where the traps in your life tend to be set. The fox's eye is a skill of pattern recognition. But there is a second, quieter tell hiding in almost every lie, one that has nothing to do with patterns and everything to do with a simple flaw in how the human brain constructs a false story under pressure. And that flaw is what we open next. Pay attention to length. Not the length of the relationship, the length of the answer. Ask someone a simple, factual question, something with a 1 or 2 sentence true answer, and watch what happens when the true answer is inconvenient for them. A truthful person tends to answer briefly and stop, because the truth requires no scaffolding. A person constructing something false will often, without realizing it, keep talking well past the point where the answer was already given, adding detail after detail that nobody requested, because on some level, they know the short version alone won't be believed, so they keep building support for it. Think of someone explaining why they were late. Traffic was bad is a complete, sufficient answer. But listen to what actually gets said sometimes. Traffic was bad, There was construction on the bridge, and then I also got a call from my mom, right as I was about to leave, which delayed me another few minutes. And then I couldn't find parking. Every additional clause is unnecessary if the first sentence were simply true and sufficient. The extra weight isn't information, it's reinforcement, poured on because some part of the speaker doesn't trust the short version to hold up alone. Machiavelli captured the mechanism behind why this works on us in The Prince. Men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who deceives will always find one who allows himself to be deceived. The key phrase is present necessities. In the moment, we are not auditors reviewing a case file. We are people trying to keep a conversation moving smoothly, and a long, detailed, confident answer feels more thorough, more honest, more complete than a short one. We mistake volume for veracity constantly, and deceivers, consciously or not, learn to supply volume precisely because it works on almost everyone, almost every time. Children do this too, before they've ever learned any of it consciously. Ask a kid who broke a vase what happened, and an honest one usually says something short and almost unhelpful. It just fell. A kid managing a false story tends to produce something elaborate almost immediately. The cat jumped on the shelf, and I tried to catch it, but I slipped on the rug because my socks were wet. A full chain of causation nobody asked for, built instantly because the short, true answer in their mind isn't going to be believed. There's a deeper reason over-explaining happens too. Constructing a false account takes real cognitive effort. The brain has to invent details, keep them consistent, and manage your reaction all at once. And that effort often leaks out as extra words, because silence, to a person managing a lie, feels dangerous. Silence invites follow-up questions. Words, even unnecessary ones, feel like a wall being built between the listener and further probing. So here's what you do with this. First, when a short, simple question gets a long, layered answer, don't focus on whether each individual detail is true. Focus on whether the length itself is proportional to the question. Second, gently ask one small, clarifying question about the least important detail they added. Something minor, low stakes. Truthful people answer trivial follow-ups without friction because there's nothing to protect. People managing a false account often show a flicker of hesitation even on the smallest, most irrelevant detail because they're checking their own construction for consistency in real time. Third, resist the urge to fill silence yourself after their answer. Let the length of their story sit there, unreacted to, for 2 or 3 extra seconds. Watch what they do with that space. Length is loud once you learn to hear it. But there's a quieter, more disciplined kind of liar, the one who doesn't over-explain at all, the one whose calm is so total it starts to look like a performance in itself. And that's exactly the tell we open up next. Not every liar over-explains. Some do the opposite. And it's actually the more dangerous pattern because it looks like exactly what we're taught to trust. Composure. A person who answers accusations with total stillness, unwavering eye contact, and a voice that never rises even slightly, reads to most of us as obviously credible because we've been trained our whole lives to associate calm with honesty and agitation with guilt. But consider what real, spontaneous emotion actually looks like when someone is caught off guard by something true and uncomfortable. It's rarely smooth. There's a flicker, a pause, a slight change in breathing, some small physical acknowledgement that the moment landed. When that flicker is completely, uniformly absent, when someone can be confronted with something serious and respond with the same even tone they'd use to discuss the weather, that absence is itself information. Total control under real pressure is not the natural human baseline. It is a trained override of the natural baseline. And trained overrides exist for a reason. Machiavelli wrote about exactly this kind of manufactured composure when describing how a ruler should present himself. He should appear to be all mercy, all faithfulness, all integrity, all humanity, all religion. Notice the word appear repeated as the operative instruction. He wasn't describing a naturally virtuous man who happens to radiate all these qualities effortlessly. He was describing a deliberate performance of virtue, assembled and maintained specifically because an audience rewards the appearance of those qualities, regardless of what's actually underneath them. The calm you're admiring in someone may not be the absence of guilt. It may be the presence of skill. Think about a job interview where a candidate is asked directly why they left their last position, and something about the departure clearly wasn't their choice. A candidate who is simply being honest about a difficult situation usually shows some trace of discomfort, a pause, a slightly quieter voice, some small acknowledgement that the topic is sensitive. A candidate who has over-rehearsed a cover story often delivers the explanation with unnervingly even professional smoothness, the kind that would actually be more reassuring if it wobbled even slightly. Here's a scenario to hold on to. Someone is confronted directly with evidence that contradicts what they told you. A reasonable, innocent person, even a calm one, typically shows some visible surprise or friction, confusion, defensiveness, something. A person who has anticipated this exact confrontation and prepared for it often shows almost none of that, because they already rehearsed this moment mentally before it happened. The absence of a normal human reaction to a normal human confrontation is the signal, not the smoothness of their explanation afterward. So build this discipline. First, stop treating perfect calm under real accusation as automatic proof of innocence. It proves preparation, which is a different thing entirely. Second, pay closer attention to the very first half-second of someone's reaction before their prepared response kicks in. That's the only unrehearsed window most people get. Third, if someone's emotional register never changes, regardless of what you say to them, mentally note that as unusual, not reassuring, because unusual composure under real pressure is itself a pattern worth tracking. Manufactured calm can fool you for a long time, but there's a mental habit underneath everything we've covered so far, a lens Machiavelli insisted on using before evaluating anyone's behavior at all. And once you adopt that lens permanently, the rest of these skills get dramatically sharper. In the Discourses on Livy, Machiavelli laid out a founding assumption for anyone trying to understand how people actually behave. It is necessary for whoever disposes a republic and orders laws in it to presuppose that all men are bad and that they will always give vent to the malignity that is in their minds when opportunity offers. This is not an insult aimed at humanity. It's a design principle. He wasn't saying everyone is evil. He was saying, build your systems and your judgment around the assumption that self-interest is always present as a possibility, rather than being surprised by it every single time it shows up. Most people do the opposite instinctively. We extend a default assumption of good faith to almost everyone we interact with, especially people we already know and like, and we treat any suspicion of them as somehow unfair, even disloyal. That instinct feels warm and generous. It also means that when someone we trust does have a self-interested reason to shade the truth, we're the last people on Earth equipped to notice it, because we've already ruled out the possibility before any evidence even arrived. Presupposing isn't the same as assuming guilt. It means asking one quiet question in the background of every important conversation. What does this person gain if I believe this specific version of events? Not, are they lying, which puts you on the defensive and makes you feel paranoid, but what's in it for them if I accept this? Which is a completely neutral, almost analytical question you can ask about anyone, including people you love and trust completely. Try this with a roommate who insists a shared bill should be split differently than usual, backed by a perfectly reasonable sounding explanation. Before accepting or rejecting the explanation itself, ask the quiet background question. Does this version of the math happen to benefit them specifically? Sometimes the explanation is completely fair and the answer is no, but sometimes the explanation is technically plausible and also happens to save them exactly the amount they'd prefer to save. And that overlap is worth noticing, even when you can't prove intent either way. Try this with someone at work who gives you an explanation for a decision that conveniently benefits them. Ask yourself, quietly, privately, if this explanation is true, what do they gain? And if it's false, what do they gain? Sometimes the answer is identical either way, and that tells you the explanation probably doesn't matter much either way. But sometimes the answer reveals a very clear incentive sitting underneath a story that otherwise sounded completely reasonable on its surface. Here's how to install this lens permanently. First, before you evaluate whether something someone told you is true, ask what they gain if you believe it, every single time, as an automatic first step, not an accusation. Second, weight your trust based on stakes, not affection. Someone you love dearly can still have enormous incentive to shade a high-stakes truth, and someone you barely know might have absolutely no incentive to lie about something small. Third, remember that presupposing possible self-interest doesn't require you to act cold or suspicious out loud. This entire lens operates silently, inside your own evaluation, while your outward behavior stays exactly as warm as it always was. This lens changes how you listen. But there's one more layer sitting even underneath motive, a layer that shows up not in what someone says, but in the fraction of a second before they say anything at all. Watch the gap. Not the words, the gap right before the words. When you ask someone a simple, unexpected, factual question, something they didn't have time to prepare for, a truthful answer generally arrives almost instantly, because the brain is simply retrieving something that already happened. A fabricated answer, even a well-rehearsed one, usually requires a fractionally longer pause first, because the brain isn't retrieving a memory, it's actively constructing one, checking it for consistency with everything already said, and only then releasing it. This gap is often less than a full second, easy to miss if you're not specifically listening for it. And it disappears completely if your question was expected, or if the person had time to prepare an answer in advance. That's exactly why the tool only works with genuinely unexpected follow-up questions, asked casually in the middle of a normal conversation, not as a formal interrogation where everyone braces for scrutiny anyway. Machiavelli's advice in the Discourses gives us the reasoning behind why this pattern is so reliable. Whoever wishes to foresee the future may consult the past, for all things of this world resemble those of past times. Human beings, under real cognitive load, behave in remarkably consistent ways because the underlying architecture of memory retrieval versus memory construction hasn't changed in thousands of years. What worked as a tell in Renaissance Florence works today for the exact same neurological reason. Our brains have not been redesigned since then. Or picture a friend describing their weekend, casually, in the middle of an unrelated conversation about something else entirely. Later, almost as an aside, you ask, "Wait, what time did you actually get to that thing on Saturday?" If the plan happened exactly as described, the number arrives instantly because it was simply stored alongside everything else that day. If some part of that weekend was reshaped for your benefit, you'll often catch a half beat of recalculation first. Small, easy to miss, but there, because the brain is quietly checking the fabricated version against whatever it already told you earlier. Try this the next time someone tells you a story about their day and something in it doesn't sit right with you. Wait until the conversation has moved on to something else entirely, then casually loop back with a small, specific, unexpected question about a minor detail from earlier. "Wait, what time did you say that was again?" A truthful person answers immediately because the detail was simply stored, not invented. Someone managing a false account often hesitates slightly, even on something small, because they're rechecking their own fabricated timeline before answering. Here's how you apply it without becoming exhausting to talk to. First, save this technique for moments that actually matter, not every casual exchange, because constant probing damages trust faster than any lie could. Second, ask your follow-up casually, almost as an afterthought, never as a formal challenge. The moment it feels like an interrogation, the natural hesitation gap disappears because now everyone expects scrutiny. Third, compare the gap to that same person's normal baseline speech pattern. Some people are naturally slow, deliberate talkers. So you're looking for a change from their normal rhythm, not an absolute universal speed. The gap reveals construction happening in real time. But there's one final signal, maybe the most common one of all, hiding in plain sight in the specific words people choose when they want you to believe something a little too badly. Listen for the overproof. Honestly, to be totally honest with you, I swear to you, I would never lie to you about this. Every one of these phrases sounds, on its surface, like extra sincerity being offered. In reality, truthful statements rarely need a verbal escort. If something is simply true, people tend to just say it, plainly, without wrapping it in a sincerity announcement first. The phrase honestly attached to a sentence is often functioning as a kind of verbal insurance policy, purchased specifically because some part of the speaker suspects the plain statement alone won't be believed. This connects directly back to appearance versus reality, the very first idea we opened with tonight. If everyone sees what you appear to be, and few ever touch what you actually are, then the smartest move available to someone managing a lie is to manufacture extra appearance, extra signals of sincerity, specifically at the exact moments where the underlying reality is weakest. The words aren't randomly chosen. They're strategically placed exactly where the story needs the most reinforcement. Notice it in writing too, not just in speech. Someone you've matched with online, who you've never actually met in person, writes, "I know this might sound crazy, but I'm being totally genuine with you. I really don't do this with everyone." Read that sentence again, slowly. It contains zero verifiable information about the person at all. It's pure sincerity packaging wrapped around an absence, sent specifically because the actual evidence of genuineness, time, consistency, shown behavior hasn't had a chance to exist yet. Notice this the next time someone answers a simple question and adds an unprompted sincerity marker. "Yeah, I finished the report. Honestly, I did it this morning." That single word, honestly, attached to a completely mundane, factual claim about a report, is doing no informational work whatsoever. Its only function is emotional, to make the claim feel more solid than the claim actually is on its own. Compare that to someone simply saying, "Yeah, I finished it this morning," with nothing attached, which is what a person says when the fact needs no support because it's simply true. Here's how to use this without becoming paranoid about every single word anyone says. First, notice sincerity markers as a category. Honestly, I swear, to be real with you, trust me. And specifically, notice when they show up attached to small, mundane claims that never needed defending in the first place. Second, notice where in the sentence the marker appears. Markers attached to the exact detail someone seems most eager for you to accept are worth more attention than markers scattered randomly through casual conversation as verbal filler. Third, track frequency over time with people close to you. Occasional use means nothing. Almost everyone says, honestly, sometimes as a harmless verbal habit, but a sudden spike in sincerity markers around one specific topic is the signal worth noticing. You now have 5 separate tools: the mask, the trap pattern, the excess length, the manufactured calm, the presupposition lens, the hesitation gap, and the sincerity marker. Used together, they stop being isolated tricks and start becoming a single, coherent way of listening. But there's one final test, the most powerful one of all, that lets you check everything you've gathered against itself, and it requires you to say almost nothing at all. Ask someone to tell you the same story again, later, from a different angle, and say almost nothing while they do it. Wait, walk me through that again. What happened first? A true memory is stored as an experience, not as a script, which means it can be reconstructed from any entry point, forwards, backwards, from the middle outward, and it will still hold together because the underlying event actually happened, and its pieces are genuinely connected to each other. A fabricated account is stored as a script, memorized roughly in one direction, and asking someone to retell it from a different angle often exposes small fractures, details that don't quite line up the second time, a sequence that shifts slightly because the person is reconstructing the performance again rather than recalling the same fixed memory twice. Think about checking a reference for someone you're about to hire. Ask the reference to describe a project once, in order, and then, later in the same call, ask an unrelated question and circle back to, actually, walk me through that project again, but start from how it ended. A genuine account holds its shape from either direction because it's describing something that actually happened. An account someone has been coached to deliver or has slightly inflated on someone else's behalf often rearranges itself subtly the second time, not because the reference is lying maliciously, but because the version they're protecting was never a single fixed memory to begin with. This works best paired with silence, which is genuinely the hardest tool on this entire list to actually use, because silence feels socially uncomfortable to almost everyone, including you. Most people, when they finish speaking and the other person doesn't immediately respond, feel a powerful, almost automatic urge to fill that silence themselves with more explanation, more detail, more reassurance. Truthful people fill silence with mundane elaboration, sometimes irrelevant tangents, because they're not managing anything, they're just talking. People managing a false account often fill silence with exactly the kind of unprompted defense we covered earlier, extra reassurance nobody asked for, because the silence itself feels like suspicion, even when your face is showing nothing at all. Machiavelli's entire political philosophy rests on a kind of patience most people never develop: the willingness to wait, observe, and let circumstances or people reveal themselves, rather than forcing a confrontation before you actually have enough information. He never wrote a line specifically about interrogation silence, but the spirit of his method is exactly this. Don't rush to react. Don't tip your hand. Watch what the other person does when nothing is pushing them in any particular direction, because that unguided moment tells you more than anything they say under direct pressure ever will. Here's how you use the retelling test properly. First, let real time pass between the first telling and the retelling. Even 10 or 15 minutes is enough for a memorized script to start drifting slightly, while a true memory stays essentially fixed. Second, ask your follow-up question and then say nothing else. Resist every urge to nod, prompt, or fill the space yourself. Let the silence do the work. Third, don't treat small inconsistencies alone as proof of anything. Everyone's memory drifts a little on minor details naturally. What you're actually watching for is a story that fractures on something structurally important, not something trivial like the exact time of day. Put these 8 tools together and something shifts permanently in how you experience every conversation you have. You stop reacting to performance and start reading underneath it. You stop needing someone to eventually confess or get caught, because you're no longer waiting for the truth to surface on its own. You're actively reading for it in real time, the way Machiavelli read the political actors of his own era. None of these tools work well in isolation, and that matters. One long-winded answer means nothing by itself. People ramble constantly for entirely innocent reasons. One flash of unusual calm means nothing by itself. Some people are simply steady by temperament. The actual signal only appears when 2 or 3 of these patterns stack on top of each other, around the same topic, at the same moment, a hesitation gap paired with an unprompted sincerity marker, or an over-explained answer paired with a story that shifts slightly on retelling. You are not building an accusation from a single data point. You are building a picture from convergence, the same way Machiavelli never judged a prince's character from one decree, but from the pattern of decisions repeated over time. So here's the question worth sitting with. Out of everything covered tonight, the mask, the fox's trap sense, the weight of over-explanation, the manufactured calm, the presupposition lens, the hesitation gap, the sincerity marker, or the retelling test, which one do you think you've been missing your whole life without realizing it? Type that one in the comments. And if you scroll back up and see yourself in the word you typed at the very start, that's not a coincidence. That's the exact gap this video was built to close. None of this is a license to become suspicious of everyone in your life, or to weaponize these tools against people who don't deserve it. Machiavelli's entire point was never that everyone is lying to you all the time. It was that you should be equipped to see clearly when it matters, so you're never again the last person in the room to understand what actually happened. The goal was never to trust less. The goal was to trust accurately, to give your confidence to people who've actually earned it through consistency, not simply to people who perform sincerity the loudest. Stay strategic, stay ethical, and stay one step ahead. Subscribe if you want more of this, because the fox's eye, once it's open, does not close again.